Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Ian and this is Copper.gravity and I make kinetic art out of copper wire and marbles. The things I make are called rolling ball sculptures and there'll be more of that later on in this episode. But for now I'm going to give you a workshop tour. So I moved house about 5 or 6 weeks ago and today I've literally just finished making the workshop so that I can get back to my hobby and make these things that I love making. I'm going to take you with me, so you're going to watch me making my RBS number 6, and it does involve a swan and perhaps some eggs. So more on that later as we get going, but for now I've divided the workshop up into kind of 5 different zones. So let's start with zone number 1. Zone number 1 is long storage of some items that I hardly ever use. Disco equipment, DJing stuff, camper van stuff, things for camping, decorating equipment, some tools. It's basically the storage zone. Zone number 2 is household recycling and freezer. And then zone number 3, e-bike and timber yard. Now I do like the e-bike, it is really heavy and it doesn't really fold up and get carried around a lot, but I do have a video on it on my channel, and the timber yard is bits of wood that I think is too good to throw away but not needed for the current job. And zone number 4 is the main workshop. What I've done here is employ a little bit of Japanese 5S technology, where I've sorted out my tools, I've set them in a nice order, I've shined them to keep them nice and clean, standardized the storage area, and the 5th one, the really important one, is to sustain it. A good example of this is the spanner wall. It's really easy to set it all up, but it's really hard to sustain it. So you'll see that everything is labelled and everything has a place, and everything should therefore go into that place. The tools I use here, I've got some hand tools, I've got the pillar drill, I've got a circular saw, a chop saw and a grinder. All of those will get out, be put onto the worktop. I've got lots of hand tools in the limb bins. Here are my nuts and bolts. And here are my little useful things that I sometimes need. Now one thing I'm really pleased with is this kitchen worktop. It's a kitchen table, it's from a dining table. I bought it on Facebook Marketplace for £20. It was so cheap, and yet it's really, really solid. It allows me to manhandle and cut and work on 8x4 sheets of plywood. It's not screwed down at all, so I can drag it out into the middle of the workshop and do my cutting out. I can paint on it, I can glue on it, I can do anything I like on it. So it's the main workhorse of the garage, and it just proves that you don't have to spend a lot of money on a big fancy worktop. You can just buy a second-hand dining table and it's a really good value for money. Then the final zone is zone number 5, the soldering station. Now this soldering station I'm really pleased with. There was a few limitations in my last house and the workbench itself was not very big. I struggled sometimes because it wasn't very deep, and also I made the side walls on an angle, which means that at the back of the table it wasn't very wide. So sometimes when I'm making a medium size or a large item, I wanted to push the sculpture to the back of the workbench in order to work on something else, maybe a smaller element for that to go onto the sculpture. But there wasn't room to put the big thing out of the way enough. So what I've done here is I've got a little bit more space. I've made the worktop a lot bigger. So the dimensions that I've got are, it's 1 meter from front to back and it's 1.6 meters from side to side. On the right hand side here you can see I've got my copper storage area. So I've got my 2mm copper, my 1mm copper, my pre-cut copper, and all my tubing and rods, the threaded bars and things like that. So this is where I get my stock of copper whenever I'm working. So it's really good to have it close by so you can reach out, grab a bit more material, cut it to length and carry on. I like these little magnetic tool walls. So I've got a small one here for my small tools and the big one up here, scissors and clips and rulers. go up on top of there. Then I've got my solder iron. This is the resistance solder iron. There's a link in the description below to my to the kit that I use, because a lot of people ask me exactly how I solder. So I've got my resistance soldering iron, and the foot switch is still going, that's underneath. Off to the right is my flame soldering kit for brazing. So this is what I use to solder or braze slightly larger material than the copper wire. So I've got a nice little tool holder for just holding the torch when it's not in use, and all I need to do to turn it on, get ready, is to go around the side and operate the two knobs on top of the bottles to switch it on. Another example here is all my unusual sized drills have a particular place where I need them. Again, Japanese 5S, label your holes and put your tools back. On the right hand wall of the workbench, I've got all my bottles and small clamps and bits of glue, and it's a place to rest everything that I need, my pen pot and my French curves and protractors that I use to get everything nice and smooth and flowing. Then I've got a light pelmet. On top of the pelmet is all my storage. So this is lots and lots and lots of clamps and bits of wood and wire wool and brackets and soldering tables and things that I need in order to help me keep things in place whilst I solder. And I do use an awful lot of clamps, so basically these clip on to the pelmet. The pelmet is hiding a great big bright light. That's something like 5,000 looms, and you shouldn't be able to see that when I'm filming, but it does give me lots and lots and lots of nice clear light in order for me to work and in order for me to film. I've then got a camera mount. This is doing for overhead shots, so I put the camera into that, and I've got a little radio for listening to tunes when I'm working. On this side I've got the vise that I use to straighten the copper, and then I've got the set of drawers. They're from IKEA, and again this allows me to store lots and lots of things in a nice straightforward manner. There we go, that's a bit better. Welcome to RBS 6. And on this bit of wall I've got the little orange drawers that I use for all my tiny RBS things, and a little shelf on top to hold the tripods. Now there is one final thing I'd like to show you, which is that this table can go up and down. I've basically got electric legs underneath that I got from Amazon, and I've got some buttons, and that allows me to set the exact working height of the bench. So if I'm working on something that's quite small and low, instead of having to bend over or use one of these benches, I can raise the table up and bring the soldering up to a level that's more comfortable for me. So here, if I wanted to, I could actually be soldering at eye height. And again, because my eyes aren't very good and my back isn't very good, I'm going to really enjoy doing this. I think I'm going to be clamping stuff here, soldering away, and it's going to be very good for my body. Now if I'm soldering on something that's quite tall, and I want, instead of having to stand on a box, which I was doing last year for RBS 5, I can send the bench back down low and solder, again, standing up at shoulder height. So I think it's absolutely brilliant. And that's the lowest it goes to. So according to the buttons, it goes down to 70 centimeters from the floor and up to 120. So that's a difference of ½ a meter that I can move the workbench with. So let me know what you think of the electric legs especially, but also zone 4, the workbench, and the other storage that I've got going on. It's a lovely space to come and work. It's hopefully a lovely place for me to do this wonderful hobby, and if you stay subscribed to my channel, then you will see me build these things over the next few years. Now I'm going to start RBS 6, or as I like to call it, RBS Swan.